I'm a Venice, California-born, Los Angeles-based sports fan, one that has played, coached, announced, and promoted sports my whole life. My love affair with sports started in my own backyard and has led me to this podcast. Thanks to the support of the Amateur Athletic Union in East Bay, I'm excited to bring you Sports Stories with Denny Lennon. Hello and welcome to the third installment of A Wooden Christmas, Sports Stories tribute to the great teacher and coach, UCLA basketball legend, John Wooden. Lynn Guerin, the founder of the John R. Wooden Course, a man who spent the last years of Coach Wooden's life with him, is our guest. The first two episodes of this tribute, like this one, is available on our website at sportsstoriespodcast.com. Also want to remind our listeners that each of the Sports Stories episodes are available as both an audio podcast and a video podcast. The video podcast on YouTube includes images and archives that support the story, including today's guest Lynn Guerin knocking down his introductory jumper on the backyard hoop at the 7428 studio location. Finally, the upcoming two episodes of Sports Stories, publishing January 9th and January 16th, will feature a two-part interview with the legendary Hall of Fame sportscaster Randy Rosenblum, who, incidentally, was the play-by-play man for the UCLA basketball broadcast in the late 70s with none other than a retired John Wooden serving as the analyst. We hope you'll join Sports Stories for our Randy New Year. John Robert Wooden, a man born in 1910 that would die in 2010, had an impact on me my whole life. I worshiped the great UCLA teams he coached in my youth. Then, as a coach and athletic director, I read his books, used his quotes, and taught from his masterwork, The Pyramid of Success. As a parent, I would continue to lean on Coach's teachings. My son Vaughn, who was born in 1992, and my daughter Sienna, she was born in 1995. As they grew up, they heard plenty of stories about a man they had never met that had retired some 20 years ago. The book that may have been Coach Wooden's most valuable, at least in my eyes as a parent, was Inch and Miles, The Journey of Success. I read this book often to my children, and while they learned the important life lessons from Inch the Inchworm and Miles the Mouse as the two completed a lesson from their wise teacher to find the meaning of success, I came to realize just what an important man John Wooden was. And it went well beyond his coaching. He, like great thinkers and philosophers, was continuing to teach all of us that listened. There was something else that struck me about Coach Wooden, and it had to do with his presence. He was always an engaging speaker in a homespun, Midwest kind of way, but I saw something else in 2005 at Occidental College near Pasadena, yes, the same school that our 44th president, Barack Hussein Obama II, attended. On a tip from an ex-student of mine, I heard Coach Wooden would be speaking at Oxy during the lunch hour. Coach was 95 at the time, and not knowing if this opportunity would present itself again, I pulled my son and daughter out of school and headed from Venice north on the 405 freeway to the 10, to the 110, to the 5, to the 2 freeway, exit Eagle Rock Boulevard, and bam, you're there. That's how it's done in LA, people. Anyhow, my 10-year-old daughter Sienna, shall I say, was a restless youngster. Other parents would drop her off after a play day and proclaim, "She is quite a character." Yes, I know what that means, thank you very much. But as Coach spoke that day in Thorne Hall, Sienna sat silent and listened intently. It was as if Buddha had appeared and mesmerized her. I'd never seen her that attentive, ever. I brought paper and crayons to occupy her, and yet she sat still and listened to the master. The speech was close to Coach Wooden's birthday, so Sienna made him a birthday card with the paper and crayons. I told her she may not get to see him after, but when Coach finished his presentation, Sienna walked to him without hesitation to hand him the card. As a line formed behind her, Coach spoke to her for what seemed like a long time, especially if you're waiting in what was now a long line. I'm pretty sure Sienna told him how much she liked Inch and Miles, then gave him his birthday card, which he read and admired. He then signed one of her blank pieces of paper, making sure he spelled her name correctly. For Sienna, love, John Wooden, UCLA. In the previous two episodes, we've covered John Wooden's youth in Indiana, growing up on a farm, his achievements as an All-State and All-American basketball player, the beginnings of his teaching and coaching career, and, thanks to the weather, his choice to take the UCLA head coaching job in 1948 instead of the one at Minnesota. At UCLA, Wooden's teams immediately raised their level of play, winning 22 games and the school's first ever conference championship in his first season. They would win 8 conference titles over the next 15 years, despite a substandard gym and no real home court advantage. Pauley Pavilion, the Bruins' home court today, would not be built until 1965. The team was often forced to share practice time with various other groups in the UCLA men's gym, which was built in 1932. The basketball team often getting only half a court for practice. The wrestling team needed the other half. Even high school teams get a full court to practice on. Could you imagine these days the complaints from parents the athletic director at, say, for instance, Sierra Canyon High School in Chatsworth would get if the team had to practice on half a court? LeBron James would be sure to let Rock Pillsbury know that Bronny did not go to Sierra Canyon to practice on half a court. But Wooden and UCLA made the most of it those days and continued to win. Given that the wrestling mats were stored in the UCLA men's gym and they were saturated with sweat from use, the place became known as B.O. Barn. The LA City Fire Marshal had deemed the men's gym unsafe for any crowd exceeding 1,300, so the team had to play their home games at a variety of locations in and around Los Angeles, including the Pan Pacific Auditorium, the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena, and even Venice High School. Go Gondos! By the time the Bruins won their first NCAA title in 1964, UCLA was well prepared to play any and everywhere. The next 12 years between 1964 and 1975 boggle the mind. Not only did UCLA win 10 out of 12 NCAA titles, including 7 straight, they had 4 undefeated seasons and set another record with an 88-game winning streak, 88 games in a row. But all dynasties eventually come to an end, and so it was for UCLA basketball in 1975. The same year our country was dealing with a post-Watergate Nixon impeachment hearing hangover, somehow Gerald Rudolph Ford Jr. had become our 38th president and told us that our long national nightmare was over. Recurring nightmares are a thing, right? Anyhow, speaking of substandard facilities, the NCAA Final Four was held at the San Diego Sports Arena in 1975. The best thing about the San Diego Sports Arena is that it's in San Diego, and it's not even in the nice part of town. This is about 10 years before the then Buffalo Braves would move into the place and stink it up even more as the San Diego Clippers. But I digress. In the 1975 NCAA Basketball National Semifinals, in what is now the Pechanga Arena, San Diego, UCLA staged a stirring come-from-behind overtime victory over Louisville in the semifinals to set up a championship game against Kentucky, a classic Blue Bloods matchup. In the locker room after the semifinal game, Coach Wooden addressed his team with a surprise announcement.
15 minutes before I decided to retire, I didn't know I was going to retire. I went to the dressing room, congratulated my players on a fine game. I said, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You gave me no problem on or off the court all year long. And that's a pretty nice thing to say about the last team you'll ever coach. Their faces dropped. Ducky almost fainted. My assistants almost fainted. The director tried to spend most of the night talking me out of it. Came as a complete surprise, but we should, because it was a surprise to me. I have no regrets. I knew I was leaving outstanding material for whoever would follow me. And just one of those crazy things. It was the right time.
Wooden's retirement would not only stun UCLA, but the basketball world. There was, of course, one more game to play for the NCAA championship, one that would be the last game John Wooden would ever coach. The pressure on the UCLA team was immense, but they, like all of Wooden's teams, were well prepared to deal with any situation. The Bruins sent Coach out with another championship, beating Kentucky 92-85, with tournament most outstanding player Richard Washington leading the way. John Wooden, the only person to be inducted as both a player and coach in the Basketball Hall of Fame, who navigated and adapted his teaching and coaching with tremendous success in the post-World War II 40s, through the fabulous 50s, the counterculture 60s, and into the protests of the 70s, was now a 65-year-old retiree. John Wooden was just starting a new phase of his life. His seminal work, The Pyramid of Success, would continue to influence more and more people. He would write and speak, visit with former players, coaches, and friends, and continue to teach us all what was really important in a life well lived. In 2003, John Robert Wooden received the nation's highest civilian honor as he was presented with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But above all the awards and accolades, he always cherished his family and the time with them the most. Sadly, after 53 years of marriage, Coach lost the love of his life, Nell, on the 21st of March, 1985. For the next 25 years of his life without her, on the 21st of each month, he would write a love letter and place it under her pillow on her side of the bed. Towards the end of his life, at 99 years of age, Coach was asked if he was afraid to die. He answered that he was not, and then, from memory, recalled a poem written by one of his former players, Swen Nader.
Why should I be afraid? That's the most wonderful thing that will ever happen. It really is. Absolutely, I'm not afraid to die. Once I was afraid of dying. Not anymore. Once I was afraid of dying, terrified at ever lying, petrified at leaving family, home, and friends. Thoughts of absence from my dear ones brought a melancholy tear once, and a dreadful, dreadful feeling of when life ends. But those days are long behind me. Fear of leaving does not bind me, and departure does not hold a single care. Peace does comfort as I ponder a reunion in the yonder with my dearest one who's waiting for me there.
John Wooden lived an extraordinary life. That life that began in 1910 came to an end in 2010. Along with 5,000 others, I had a chance to bring my children, now 5 years after they saw him speak at Occidental College, to say goodbye to Coach at a memorial held in Pauley Pavilion at UCLA, right on Nell and John Wooden Court. The stories that day from players, family, friends, city leaders, and a host of admirers were a testament to a great man that taught us all so much more about life than about basketball. It was in the final years of John Wooden's life that he met today's guest, Lynn Guerin. Lynn, a highly accomplished businessman that has consulted with several Fortune 500 companies, recognized Coach Wooden's lessons were ones that could serve others as a roadmap to success in many facets of life, including business. Lynn, a man with hard-earned successes of his own, was able to convince Coach Wooden into a collaboration to develop the renowned John R. Wooden course. Now that I've dropped Vaughn, Siena, Inch and Miles, Occidental College, No Drama Obama, Buddha, Sierra Canyon High School, LeBron James, Rock Pillsbury, Bronny, B.O. Barn, the Pan Pacific Auditorium, the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena, Venice High School, Tricky Dick, Mr. Nice Guy, the San Diego Sports Arena, the Buffalo Braves, the San Diego Clippers, Richard Washington, Swen Nader, and Nell and John Wooden Court, where Coach's dearest one is with them. Here is my interview from the Sports Stories 7428 studio in Westchester, California, with the Chief Executive Officer of the John R. Wooden course, the man with a knockdown jumper, Lynn Guerin. All right, buddy. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Thank you. All righty. Let's get it going.
Is this right?
Yeah. So. Yep. Do that right there. How's it going, Lynn?
It's great.
You get a
Great to be with you.
you get to spend a little time on the 405 River there? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Siri had some strange idea about how I should get here because the route was pretty circuitous.
Nice. Nice. How'd you do on your shot out there?
Well, I took the John Wooden approach at 12 feet to the right.
Yep.
You got to bank it. You're always going to make a much higher percentage of shots if they're banked. I banked it. I made it.
Nice. I remember that when I was a kid, because it's when I was watching John Wood and stuff, but it was one of my older cousins. We were watching a high school game, and a guy pulled up and knocked down a 12-footer, just like you say, with that bank shot. And that was the first thing he said. He goes, "Oh, Coach Wooden." And that was one of the first times when I was young getting that cross-reference of how much he had, influenced everything in and around not only L.A., but, the country.
Well, he had schooled his team so well on that shot. If you were a UCLA basketball player and you were to the right or to the left, you were going to take the shot off the board, or you probably were going to get a little bench time.
Well, there was one. We went to go see Coach. My wife and I went to go see Coach speak, and of course, for years I'd always been the Coach Wooden guy, and so he, you submitted these questions in advance, on an index card, and then they pick out a few. And mine didn't get picked out, but hers did. And the question was along those lines. It was, what's the best way to motivate your players? And he goes, well, I've always found a seat next to me on the bench was quite a motivator.
Yeah. Well, he'd also said that one of the best ways to motivate was the pat on the back, even though sometimes the pat needed to be a little lower and a little harder.
Yep. So, he sure did.
Yeah.
So I love what you brought here. So for our podcast listeners, why don't you explain it a little bit? It's beautiful.
Well, it's a custom piece of wood carving, the Pyramid of Success, that was built by a vice president at the In-N-Out Corporation, one of America's better companies in the fast food business. And a number of years ago, we did a team camp for them. We actually took their top 200 executives through a full day John Wooden Pyramid of Success course. And one of the vice presidents, who happens to be obviously a very accomplished woodworker, built this. Actually, Beautiful. He built 3 of them. He gave one to me, he gave one to Coach Wooden, and also one to the family. So there's 3 of these out there someplace.
And did Coach put his in his den?
He had it in his den for a while. I think it got donated probably with everything else to UCLA, and very well could be somewhere in their Hall of Fame exhibit on campus.
They did a nice job on the remodel with the Poly Pavilion on the outer ring of Poly Pavilion, and they even recreated his den. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a tribute to the man that built it. Essentially, it was supposed to have been built years and years before it got built. He was promised, I think, when he signed his original contract with UCLA, that he was going to have a new facility within 2 years, and I don't think it came for 16 or 17 years, but once it came, I don't know, I think his record was 179 and 2 in that building or something.
It sure was.
Coach didn't lose too many at Poly.
So, Lynn, where did you grow up?
I grew up in northern Ohio, a small town about 10,000 people in Shelby, Ohio.
In Shelby?
Yeah, north central Ohio, about halfway between Cleveland, Columbus, and Toledo, right in the center of the state.
I visit Ohio often, and I love the sense of the community that surrounds athletics there.
Yeah, if you grew up in Ohio, it was all about sports. Interesting. Just a weekend or so ago, I attended the funeral services, or the memorial service, for Willie Knowles, who was one of Coach's early All-Americans. And you'd say, well, what does Willie Knowles have to do with Shelby, Ohio? Well, Shelby, Ohio was the birthplace of my hometown hero, a fellow named Larry Siegfried, who played for the Boston Celtics. He was captain of Ohio State in the 1960 team. And he ended up playing with Willie on the Celtics. In fact, they became fast friends, and they were even roommates. So I had met Willie through some men's ministry work. We became good friends, and we got a chance to talk about my hero and his roommate. So nice. Shelby, Ohio, and Willie Knowles from San Pedro, and one of Coach's first All-Americans, had a great relationship.
Willie Knowles made a big impression, I know, on then Lou Alcindor, knowing that he could see other African Americans that had an opportunity to succeed at UCLA, and could be active within the student government on campus, and And UCLA was particularly good in that area.
Yeah, Willie had a remarkable life and had a tremendous impact on so many people, and he was part of the recruiting process that brought Lou Alcindor to UCLA. He was the first black captain of a pro sports team, the New York Knicks, and Willie was also a member of the first starting 5 in the NBA, all black players.
Wow.
With Bill Russell and the Jones boys and Satch Sanders.
You know, at the end of this podcast, I'm going to give you a quiz, and I'm already getting the feeling you're going to do fine. Everybody worries about the quiz at the end, and this one's going to be on Wooden, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Well,
he goes deep. He goes deep.
Yeah, if you're a Coach Wooden disciple, all you can do is do your best, right?
That's right. That's right. Now, what your parents how did they get to Ohio? Were they born there?
Good question. I'm not really sure how my parents got to Ohio. Mm-hmm. Grandparents grew up in that small town area too, so okay. I'm not sure what brought them to Ohio.
What did your old man do?
That's a great question. Not much.
Okay.
I didn't have. I'm a third generation abandoned son. We had fathers that didn't take too good a care of their sons for 105 years in my family, and that's really one of my connections to John Wooden in trying to break that chain in my own family. When John Wooden, as an example, teaches loyalty on the pyramid of success, mm-hmm. it really speaks to my heart, because I understood from a life standpoint what happens when there isn't any loyalty
sure.
In a family, and how that impacts you. And it's when I get a chance to teach the pyramid of success and talk about loyalty, it's especially, I think, poignant for me, because it really is a life-changing concept when men take care of their kids and take care of their family. And the kind of man John Wooden is the kind of man and father I think we all try to be.
We all aspire to be.
Yep.
Yeah, I got that from you when we first met, because it was. Why don't you come a little over here, because I don't want your cord to knock over this wonderful piece of work here. When we first met at Christos, is that what it was? Christos,
yes.
For lunch, and which was close to where my boy went to school at Loyola, and at Loyola High School, and you immediately started talking about your boy and how he's doing in high school, and I could tell you're that kind of guy.
Yeah, he's connecting to basketball. He's playing on one of America's best high school teams right now. He plays at Rancho Christian mm-hmm. in Temecula, and they're a top 10 team in the country this year, with a fellow named Evan Mobley, who is the number 1 player in the country in the class of 2020, and supposedly maybe a top 1, 2, or 3 draft choice for the NBA. He's going to USC. Breaking our heart, the UCLA fans.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But they hired his father, and they also assigned his older brother, who played at Rancho Christian as well. So
wow.
Still pretty involved in basketball, and it'll be a joyful season. We're going to travel all over the country watching the kids play high school basketball this year.
That's unreal. How did you get involved in athletics? Was it through your school, or?
Yeah, I was a 4-sport athlete in high school, and went to Western Michigan University on an athletic scholarship. Oh, wow. So, and grew up with a hero like Larry Siegfried, so I've followed sports my whole life. I'm a sports nut, particularly baseball and basketball and football.
Right, and then was it in high school that you started to think about, wow, I can play in college?
Yeah, I think so. It was really, as a 10-year-old, watching Larry Siegfried be the best high school basketball player in the state of Ohio, and thinking, well, geez, if that could happen to somebody like him, maybe I could do something with my life. And I had a 4th grade teacher who was particularly encouraging at that time, and I would go to all of Larry's games and keep track of all the points he scored, and come back the next day and tell the story to my 4th grade teacher in the class, and she could see the spark, and she helped to light the spark.
That's excellent. Do you remember her name?
Sure. Her name was Geneva Hoyman, Hoyman. She only taught 1 year in our school, but she changed my life.
That's terrific. I love those kind of stories.
She actually made a promise to me. She said, Lynn, if you make the varsity basketball team at Shelby, and I know you will, I'll buy you the blazer you'll need to travel with the team.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you circle back around for that, or was
she
agreed
left
to-
a year later, but it didn't matter because the seed was planted, the promise was made. I did make the varsity basketball team, when I was a sophomore, junior, and senior, and
Wow.
it didn't matter. Miss Hoyman had just said, "Hey, I appreciate what you're trying to do and who you are, and I'm going to support that." And man, that's the story with the possibility for every teacher in the country today, and kids need it so badly. That's what we're trying to do in teaching the pyramid of success in schools.
That's what and you're giving concrete ideas and structure to being able to inspire young people. We'll get to that. So tell me a little bit about Western Michigan. Did you enjoy your time there?
Oh yeah. Kalamazoo, Michigan was about 350 miles from my hometown in Shelby, Ohio. I didn't have any transportation, so I had a lot of interesting journeys hitchhiking back and forth from Ohio to Kalamazoo. That's how I got back and forth to school. And the head coach at Western Michigan's name at the time, I think, was Bill Doolittle, and he was a friend of my high school coach, and they actually played together at Mansfield with another fellow named Paul Dietzel, a Hall of Fame coach who went on to LSU. Yeah, so it was a great experience, a long way from my hometown, and just a great place to go to school. I'm still a Bronco fan. I did a master's degree there before I left as well, and so Western's certainly got a sweet spot in my heart. My younger brother ended up going to Western Michigan and graduating from there after he got out of the Air Force. So we love the Broncos.
Where after Western Michigan? Did you come out west or?
No, I worked in the Midwest for a couple of years. I worked for for Johnson & Johnson, an industrial division of J&J, for a few years in sales and marketing. Then I went to work for General Electric, and then I went to work for a consulting company and training company in the Detroit area. And they had a lot of business in the automotive area. They were kind of a captive agency to General Motors and did some really big time work in the car business. And eventually that's how I got to California when we won a project to launch the Infinity division of Nissan.
I see.
And I moved to California to spearhead that project and then invent a luxury car company. And ironically, that's eventually how I met John Wooden.
The Detroit way. It seems I often listen to different interviews and stuff, and that seems to be a thing. Like there's a certain work ethic and an ability to reproduce your best efforts time and time again. Is that something that rubbed off on you being around the car industry?
Well, I think that work ethic was planted long before I got to that. I think the work ethic was planted by my mom, who raised three boys without an education, without ever having a good job, but being just a wonderful, hardworking woman. My grandmother was the same way. She managed actually a 5 and 10 cent store.
Oh wow!
When I grew up, it's where I got my first job. But those two women showed me what it meant to care and to work hard, and taught me the value of work. I'd say there was a time they may have had some jobs that I wasn't too proud of, that the fact that they held it, but that's the silly pride of a young man.
Yeah.
But what they showed me was what the real value of hard work was, and what it meant just to do the right things for the right reasons.
So you came out this way on the Infinity project.
Yeah.
And where'd you land? In what part of California?
Southern California. Yeah, we set up an office in Irvine. I initially lived in Irvine when I moved out, and been here ever since.
and were you married at this time?
Yeah, I was married.
And now remind me, I know you have a son.
Yeah, I actually have two sons.
Two sons.
I have an older son who's now out here with my two grandsons. He's a director at a company called Pacific Dental Services, where we actually did an awful lot of John Wooden training. We actually helped, I'd say, build that company on some of the foundations and principles of the John Wooden course. Yeah.
And so you got out here to Irvine, started working on that Infinity, and did that lead to your consulting business, or you came out with your consulting business?
Well, the company that I worked for that did that project, they were in the consulting, training, and performance improvement world. They were really one of the pioneers in that business. And at one time, there was more industrial video shot in Detroit than any place on the planet around the car company. So We were deep into the consulting and training field, but I left that company before I left California and started my own business, and it was in that process that I got a major contract with the University of Toyota. Met John Wooden, began working with him.
How did the Toyota and Wooden connect?
In launching the University of Toyota, they wanted to develop some management and leadership modules for all their dealers and for their executives.
Okay.
And one of the ideas was improving coaching for managers. And we went out and said, well, let's find the best coaches on the planet, bring them in, put them in front of a camera, interview them, talk to them about what coaching is all about. And when you were looking for great coaches there, obviously the first place you'd look would be John Wooden.
Sure.
I didn't know Coach Wooden at the time, but I had another client who knew someone who did know him.
Okay.
So I was able to get an introduction to meet Coach, bringing him into the process, and we developed a...
Did Coach think you were an impersonator of him? You resemble him, right?
Oh,
People
I do.
tell you this a little bit.
Yeah.
You do. You look like Coach Derry when he was winning all his championships.
Yeah. Well, no.
That's the Coach I remember.
I don't think so. So at that time, if that was 1998.
Well, that was well beyond.
Well, so Coach at that point, our relationship started when he was 88 years old.
Wow.
And lasted, obviously, until he passed away. Still lasts because I'm still in business with the family, which we have been since day one.
What was that initial meeting like?
Well, the first time I met Coach Wooden was, I almost can't describe it. It left you breathless. And he had such a peace and a sense of grace and humility about him, but a sense of quiet strength that just spoke to you. And you couldn't be in John Wooden's presence without ever walking away and feeling like,
Right.
I need to be a better person.
Yeah, that's
if I could be just a little more like this guy, I think my life could be a little better, and I think I could do a better job as a dad. As a leader in a company, whatever it is you do, you just felt like he could help you be better. And that's really what the John R. Wooden course is all about.
I had shook his hand a couple of times at UCLA games. He was always so accommodating. He'd sit in that same seat. But I hadn't really, had any interaction with him. And then an ex-player of mine was going to Occidental College and called me and said, hey, Coach, John Wood is speaking at my campus today. I can get you in, I said, oh, great. And I actually took my two children out of class to go there because who knows how many times. And it was probably right around that time that you're mentioning. And because I think my daughter was about 6 or 7 and my son, 9 or 10. Now, my daughter sitting still for her was a big project. There had to be multiple activities in order to keep her in her chair at any level. And what was so fascinating, it was as if she was like looking at a levitating Buddha. She was transfixed by this guy.
Yeah.
And it was so impressive the way that he was able to just keep her attention all the way through. And then she finally, I think, made a little picture and give it to him. And it was so sweet. He had so many people wanted to see him. And he spent a good 8-10 minutes just talking to her about how she drew that and how she was doing in school.
Yeah.
And it was so sweet. It was and just like I had the same feeling. I was like, okay, that's a top guy. That's a top guy.
Yeah, he had time for everybody, and I traveled with him on a number of occasions. Flew cross country with him a couple of times. Spent many hours with him at the condo there in Encino. He had a particular technique that worked well with kids, in the condo in Encino. He always had lots of these little jars of candy all around, particularly orange slices. Those were one of his favorites.
Okay.
So he'd always get out the orange slices. I took my young son, Cole, to his place a time or two, and the orange slices always worked.
Always got him. Now, okay, so you had this initial meeting, and then I would imagine you had to, earn his trust, and he wanted to make sure you're have some level of competency, so that if he was going to launch a course with his name on it, I'm sure he wanted it to be top notch.
Yeah, well, it was a couple of years from the time at which that initial meeting came together, and the early projects that we worked on, a number of them in the automotive industry, where I was able to put together speaking engagements and things for him. So it was probably at least a couple of years before then, I really became knowledgeable of all of the content and information and the pyramid of success and his coaching model and all those things that really represented, content that we might use. So it was maybe 2 years later when I sat down and wrote what was about a 5-page letter, scheduled a meeting with him, took the letter to him, and gave him a vision for what.
Was the grammar appropriate on this letter?
Oh, man, yeah. And gave him a vision of what I thought the John R. Wooden course could be, how we could work together, and all that. And interestingly, that meeting, we spent at least a couple hours together, and after going through all that, I can still see him today putting the letter kind of on his nose and kind of tilting back his head and just saying, "Oh, this is a wonderful vision, Lynn, but I don't think I'm going to do it."
Oh, wow. Is that right?
So after all that work and the development of the relationship and all of that, John Wooden said no. And one of the things I'd learned in the couple of years of working with him, that John Wooden's yes was his yes and his no was his no. Mm-hmm. But when he said no, I didn't hear no. What I heard was, well, maybe we're not quite there yet. I immediately pictured the pyramid of success and went through the blocks and said, well, maybe I haven't worked hard enough, or we just haven't connected. I haven't done enough of my homework yet. Maybe I wasn't enthusiastic enough. And I sort of went on skills. Maybe he doesn't think I've got the skills it'll take to develop that. So in my own mind, I quickly ran the tape on the pyramid, taking it all the way to the top and saying, well, this is definitely the opportunity for competitive greatness. John Wooden has said no.
Be at your best when your best is needed.
Yeah, what am I going to do to turn that around? So we worked together another year.
Okay.
On some other really good, nice projects and nice fees and things like that, things that had an impact on the companies we were working with. And then we had an opportunity to take 300 managers from Nissan to Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And we built a 15-foot, 20-foot pyramid of success and put it on stage.
Is that right?
And our task for that meeting was try to get 300 managers from all across the company who were working in 6 or 7 divisions, trying to get them all to have one jersey on, to be on one team. The executive vice president of the company at the time said, I got a lot of great players, but we got too many teams going here, and I've got to get them all in the same jersey.
Wow.
So we constructed a day that helped them do that, and we literally did that physically, put them all in the same shirt. And
that was was that the beginning of a lot of the curriculum or the core of the John R. Wooden course?
Yeah, we put together a really nice set of materials for that, and some of that eventually ended up into the John R. Wooden course. But it was after that meeting, actually his daughter happened to be there, and Craig Impleman, my business partner, actually was there. And I guess they thought that we did such a good job representing his content, and they saw the professionalism with which we conducted the meeting and so on. And so I got a call a day later, and they said they changed their mind and wanted to move ahead with the Wooden course.
So he checked you in the game.
Yeah, he did. Another thing I remember about that meeting was the idea of getting everybody in the same shirt. There were actually a couple of people who came down from their room to start that meeting and didn't have their shirt on. So we had maybe 300 people, 298 people had the same shirt on, and there was a couple of outliers there in the audience that didn't have their shirt on. And Coach Wooden found a very subtle but powerful way to call attention to them. And I can tell you, at break time, they ran up, put their shirts on, and came back down, and we had everybody sitting there in the same jersey.
That's like with Bill Walton when he came back after winning the championship and with his long hair. He's like, I've earned the right to do this, Coach. And he says, yes, you have. Yeah. We're sure going to miss you here at UCLA.
Yep.
And he went and quickly got his hair cut.
Yeah. Coach Wooden had a powerful way of drawing attention to things in a proper manner, and enabled people or gave them an opportunity to do the right thing.
Had you were you I'm sure you're aware, nobody could not be aware that love basketball of Coach Wooden's great success. But were you aware of the Pyramid of Success and his teachings, like as you were coming up when you were in college and as a young person?
I can't say I was aware. I mean, there wasn't anything or anybody out there that was teaching the Pyramid of Success. I mean, I think at that point that just represented a little bit of what John Wooden was about. And it was something that was hanging, in his office. But, there wasn't really, there may have been a representation or two out there on the Pyramid of Success. There may have been a version of it sold in the UCLA bookstore.
Yeah,
I don't know.
right?
But we just started doing a lot of homework. There was maybe a book or two that had been written at that time. A fellow named Brian Biro had written a book that had some elements of it. And then he had started to work with Steve Jameson on, 2 or 3 really good books. So, but I wasn't aware of the Pyramid of Success, and I certainly didn't grow up with the Pyramid of Success on my refrigerator and followed those principles. Now, what I knew is, or what I found out after working with him for a number of years, that a lot of the things that he taught and that he was all about was easy for me to recognize because I saw them in the men who coached me in my high school. We had a great group of really professional coaches. A gentleman, Bill Wilkins, who coached in my high school for some 20 plus years and is in actually 3 of those, 4 of those 5 coaches are in the Ohio High School
nice.
Coaching Hall of Fame. That's how good our little staff was. And so the things that they did and the way that they taught and the way that they cared and who they were as men and the level of integrity and the way they treated their families and all of the things that represented the best of John Wooden, I'd seen those things and they'd had an impression on me. And as a kid growing up without a father, it was just one more example. Man, a coach can be a life changer, particularly for men. If they don't have strong men in their life, hopefully they'll find a coach that can help show them what that all means.
When I first got involved in coaching, I always had this big plan after my NBA All-Star career, then settle in as a coach. And I said, I'm just going to win like John Wooden did. And I read all through, I think, a couple of books. One with Bill Sharman, another was Modern Practical Basketball.
Yeah.
And he's just never brought up the word win. It was all about the system. It was about working with people. It was about so many things that really laid a foundation for me to be able to be a coach and have success. And I got to imagine he's done that for so many people in their life work, whatever they are. If they follow that and now the course that you have, that's the prescription right there.
Yeah, the unique things, in my mind, the things that were particularly unique and powerful about Coach Wooden. One was the quality of the foundation on which he built his life, the values he learned from his parents, his approach to things, his propensity to always want to do the right thing and always thinking about things, in a proper way. That was so important. He also had this incredible amount of self-discipline. Even people who are very knowledgeable, who could be very successful, sometimes lack the self-discipline it takes and go to one of the blocks on the pyramid, self-control it takes to get yourself organized, to keep yourself organized, and to be disciplined enough to do all the things it takes to be successful. John Wooden had remarkable self-control, self-discipline, and then his organizational skills were so superior. The way he organized his time, the way he followed through on details, the way he organized his practices.
Yeah, I copied those.
Yeah, he was I think what was, in my mind, particularly unique was he had this desire to go to Purdue and be a bridge builder. He wanted to be a civil engineer. And ironically, he couldn't take the engineering curriculum because he had to work through the summer. They had a program he had to be part of, but he couldn't, so he had to drop out of the engineering school. That's how he got to the English curriculum.
Oh, I see.
But he never stopped. I mean, he was very much an engineer. He had this ability to see big picture. If he was going to build a bridge, what that bridge would look like. Every span, he knew exactly what it looked like. He also had that great left side ability to see every bolt that was going to be required,
yeah.
every bar of steel that had to come together. So he could see the big picture. He could break it down into the small picture. He had the ability to pull all that together.
He sure did.
And then as a leader, he had the ability to lead them across the bridge.
That's right.
So I think John Wooden spent his whole life building bridges, mostly from places people wanted to go to or thought they were to the success that they wanted to have.
So interesting. One of the ways I used to explain to my teams was his explanation of a car being like a team.
Yeah.
And not everybody can be the engine. And not everybody's going to be, but how important the windshield wipers were.
Yeah.
And if that lug nut came off and that wheel comes off, the car doesn't go anywhere. And that's really interesting because that sounds like an engineering mind at work there.
He had that unique ability to think like an engineer and to speak like a poet.
Yeah, he sure did.
So that was he had a remarkable mind that was remarkable.
You spent the last 14 years of his life with him? 15 years? Something like that?
Actually, from 98 to 2010. So or 96 to 2010. So
and he had such a great recall. Like poems to teams to instances, unreal.
His memory was remarkable. I thought he had a photographic memory. He said he didn't, but Swen Nader, one of his players, used to write him poems. He'd get it in the mail, and a day or two later, he would have memorized it. And so I don't know how he could possibly not have had a photographic memory.
Of course, yeah. I also thought something that had caught my eye early on. I think our great columnist out here for the LA Times was Jim Murray. And he wrote this beautiful column about Coach Wood and talked about his devotion to his wife, especially after she passed. I think he put a letter under her pillow on what, her birthday or?
He would. This is part of the story when we think about loyalty and teach loyalty. And, when John Wooden teaches loyalty, he demonstrated it with every ounce of fiber of who he was as a person, particularly in his devotion to his wife. He lost her, said it was the only time he ever fell off the pyramid of success. He went into a really bad place, but eventually came back because through the birth of a grandchild.
Yeah.
But his devotion to her was just remarkable. He wrote her a letter on the 20th of every month, which was the day she passed away. And he did it every month for over 20 years. And he would take those letters and take them to the cemetery, and he'd read them to her, and then he'd bring them home, and he kept them in a stack by the bedside, and they were tied with a pink ribbon of hers, which was just remarkable. And he also had this, he had mentioned that after she passed away, he never slept under the sheets of the bed because he thought that was a place that was only for the two of them.
That's so
that
sweet.
level of loyalty and intimacy was just beyond comparison. And so I think John and Nell Wooden, I'm hoping someday there will be a movie made.
I hope so too.
Because I think John and Nell Wooden is one of the greatest love stories never told.
I'm with you on that, and I loved the first time I went to Pauley Pavilion and saw that it was Nell and John Wood in court.
Yeah,
like you just knew the coach got what he wanted there.
Yeah, I don't think the world knew how influential. I mean, we've come to find out more and more, but how really influential on him she was at really important times in his life, and even early on, as she got him to take a speaking class and things like that helped him come out of a shyness. He was really a pretty shy guy, if you can believe that. One of the great communicators of our time, but it was things that she encouraged him to do that helped make him who he was.
I found also really nice his players, his former players, or even his colleagues, his coaches, that would come back and visit him in his den or go to the have breakfast with them. And one, he was always so accommodating, but you could just feel this sense of love that was coming back to him.
Yeah. He set the tone, for what that was all about. When he would always say that the two most important words in the dictionary were love and balance. That really defined his life. Even in the den, he had these two bookcases. He had two bookcases and carved bookcases, and on one bookcase was carved the word love, and on the other one was carved the word balance. So, that's one of the concepts we teach in the wooden course. If you can surround your life with those two things, love and balance, things are going to go better.
It's it's been recognized, the pyramid, as like this masterpiece, and it's really nice that you are a part of it and have this chance to quantify it and spread it, through the John R. Wooden course.
Yeah, I think my personal opinion, and now I've been looking at it and studying it and teaching it, trying to understand it at different levels now for almost 20 years. And my personal opinion, as an individual who needs help with every one of these blocks every day of my life, to be the kind of person I'd like to be, I think it's the single most powerful definition of what successful behavior looks like. And not just to be successful, kind of as our world would define it, but to be successful as Coach Wooden defined it. The pyramid of success all points to John Wooden's definition of success.
Which previous to that, his knowledge of it was more based on material items, like attaining either wealth or something along those lines, and I felt like he really redefined success towards being at peace with yourself.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That started very early when he began to think about what success is, and he recalled going through some sessions where a class had defined it, and it's ironic. He will refer to a Webster's definition of success that refers to the accumulation of material possessions or the attainment of a position of power or prestige. And it's ironic how much of that definition still is the primary definition of success that it seems most of the world is pursuing. But when Coach said success is really about four things, it's about peace of mind, it's about self-satisfaction, it's about the effort you make, and it's the effort based on the capability you have to be your best. And the world can't tell you what success is. You have to know in your heart. You have to pursue it in your heart. And ultimately, only you know whether you've given your best in any given situation. So it's really a lifetime blueprint. More than a lifetime. I think it's a generational blueprint. One of the reasons I'm still doing this is that there is a whole new generation of young people out there who need to know who John Wooden is, what he stood for, what he thought about. All of the foundations that made his life great are still the things that can make people's lives great today, and do it in a way that has all the controversies that surround the life that we live in today. I feel, I think kids are under so much pressure today. I have a high school senior, and the pressure to get into college, the pressure of social media, the pressure to have tens of thousands of friends in your Snapchat or Facebook account, or not Facebook. He wouldn't go anywhere near Facebook. That's for mom and dad.
Right.
He's somewhere else. But these kids have all these friends, but they have nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
They have all these friends and all these connections, but they don't have anybody that they can share their heart with, or their troubles with.
That's where the balance and the love come in.
Yeah, it's somehow technology is supposed to have connected us, but it may have connected us technologically, but I think it's disconnected us from our standpoint of our heart and our mind and the things that we really should be thinking about.
Well, you're fighting the right fight with what you're putting out there. I love spreading the message. So let's see how successful you're on our quiz here.
All right, be happy to go.
Let's see. Okay, I got a few questions for you.
Okay.
What year was Coach born?
1910.
You know his birthday?
His birthday just happened. I think it was October 14th.
Very good. Yeah, I knew we were close to it here. Interesting on that one. I used to run a big fundraiser volleyball tournament that was really popular that all the Catholic grade schools would come to at school at St. Mark's. And we'd take over, and it would be huge. We'd block off the street, and it was big, and I would always have a guest of honor. And so we always kicked around. I said, man, I'd really love to get Coach here as a guest of honor. And so for whatever reason, I had his phone number. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I called, and he goes, hello. And I recognized that voice. And I got so nervous, I hung up on Coach. I said, I couldn't believe he would answer his own phone. And I was like, I breathed for a second. I called back, and he goes, hello. And I go, Coach, this is, I'm sorry, I did hang up on you. And he goes, oh, okay. And I said, and he goes, well, I'll tell you what, it sounds like a great thing, and I would do it, but that's my birthday, and I'll be spending time with the family. And I was like, okay, thanks, Coach. But, yeah, I hung up on Coach Wooden. I got 2 words. All right, so what high school did Wooden go to?
Well, he Martinsville.
That's right, he
Martinsville, Indiana.
And they won the state title. Do you know about what year?
The Artesians, I think it may have been around
nice.
1927.
You are on fire, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay. So Coach and Nell were married in 1932. And what did they do on their honeymoon? What concert did they attend?
They went to hear the Mills Brothers.
That's right, they did.
Yeah, and Coach said he thought they were going to sing all night.
Yep. I love that. The Mills Brothers are brilliant.
He had, that's just one of the little stories he tells. And Coach had a wonderful sense of humor. I think that's one of the things that people don't know and don't appreciate. He was a very funny man, loved jokes, knew a lot of them, memorized a lot of them, had a lot of great stories, loved to laugh. It's one of the reasons he and Swen Nader were such good friends.
Right. The Mills Brothers influenced my uncles and my dad, who were the Lennon brothers, who then in turn, like the Andrews sisters, influenced the naming of the Lennon sisters, Yes. So the Mills Brothers, that always caught my attention. And then I actually got some of their songs down, and they're brilliant.
Yeah.
They're great. I can see why Coach liked them. So this is pretty easy for you. He's a 3-time All-American. At what college?
Purdue. Boilermaker.
He led the Boilermakers to 2 Big Ten titles and what national championship? What year?
Oh, I guess the national championship would have probably been in 31, 32, something like that.
That's the season, buddy. Okay, while he was playing basketball at Purdue, he was nicknamed something.
The Indiana Rubber Man.
That's right. Go ahead. Explain that.
Well, I think he got that nickname from the way in which he played the game. He was really muscular. He had great speed. He had great hops. Coach said he could dunk the ball at 5'9", 5'9.5". And he ran
awesome.
around the floor playing tough defense, and he was always bouncing up and off the floor.
Right
so
up.
So he'd bounce right up, and that's where he got the nickname, the Indiana Rubber Man.
That's sometimes
when you see pictures of him, he was just
rocked.
buffed. He had some guns on him that were really
he
really
did,
special.
and I think that's lost in the telling because people kind of start with the pyramid and they go, sure, he was the great coach, and then that's where they leave off. They forgot he was the best player in the country.
He was the Michael Jordan of his day.
He was well known, outside of the Midwest when it was really a regional sport.
Yeah.
What was his first coaching job? It was a high school.
Dayton, Kentucky.
God, you're on fire, buddy. I got a feeling this was going to happen. All right. So following his discharge, he went to what college to coach?
Indiana State.
He sure did. What was it called then, though?
I think it was called Indiana State Teachers College.
That's
maybe.
right.
Yeah.
So that was in 46. Okay, so at Indiana State, he completed his master's degree. Do you know what he got it in?
Poetry, I think, actually.
Yeah. Wow. I usually would have got somebody by now, easily. He turned down an offer to coach the Lakers.
He did.
Do you know a little bit about that? I just put an asterisk next to it because I've heard that. I just never really had the full story on it.
Yeah, I think it was actually close to his retirement time, and Jack Kent Cooke was owning the Lakers at that point, and I think there was 2 things. He was offered $1 million a year, and this was for a guy who never made more than $32,500, and a lovely condo on the ocean that was probably the only reason he even considered it briefly was because it was something that was so possibly so special for his wife.
Wow.
But I use that story actually as an example for coaches' orientation to money. It's just he thought the more you had, the more complicated it made your life.
More money, more problems.
And the more difficulty it put you to. So he didn't need $1 million. He didn't take that job because he wouldn't have the opportunity to teach and coach the game, which is really what he loved to do.
That's what I heard. Okay, he coached 27 seasons at UCLA. How many NCAA titles?
He won NCAA titles?
Yeah.
Yeah, he won 7 straight. Won 10 and 12 years. Went on a run 10 and 12 years. Took him 15 or 16 years to get
the
there.
first
But,
one, but,
yeah, as Coach said, once he learned something, he knew it pretty good.
How many games overall do you know? That's a tough one. I
think somewhere around 646,
Jeez,
something
you're on
like
fire. You're 664. Yep.
Yeah, something like that.
All right.
Yeah.
So they had a record winning streak of how many games?
88.
And how many undefeated seasons?
4.
30-0 seasons.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. Connected that interestingly, he used to have this little thing he did every year where he would, at the beginning of the season, write down the number of wins that he thought his team would have, and he'd put it on a little piece of paper and stick it in a drawer. And he wouldn't look at it till the end of the season. And connected to that, I think he said twice he thought he would have undefeated seasons. One year he didn't have it, and then there was another year he had it and didn't think he'd have it, but ended up having 4.
And what was so fascinating about the way he prepared for teams is he prepared his team.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't into scouting reports, and
Yeah.
he knew a little bit about the other team and who
Yeah.
would guard who, but
Yeah.
that was about it.
Yeah, I think it was said of his teams, everybody knew what he was going to do. They just couldn't stop him. They did it so well.
Do you happen to know what he was honored with as in 1972?
Well, he was probably 72.
It was a magazine.
Sports Illustrated Man of the Year.
Golly.
Yeah.
Golly, he's so good. Okay, so he announced his retirement, won his 10th national championship. Who did they beat?
They beat Denny Crum and Louisville in the semifinals, and I think they beat Kentucky in the finals.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
I mentioned that Louisville game
Yeah.
primarily because he thought maybe that was one of the best games that was ever played in college basketball, and Denny Crum was assistant and very much, cut in the wooden cloth, and he thought those two teams played as well as they could possibly play a college basketball game. He felt bad that either team, that one team had to lose, but he was happy, said that the right team won.
Yeah. Yeah, Denny Crum was rumored to have been the one to succeed Coach, but instead they went in a different direction.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Yep.
Yeah, they've been trying to find that direction ever since.
They have been. They really have been.
Yeah.
Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton, we all know, were great, but he won how many championships without those two?
Well, he would have won, 3. He would have won 2 with Bill, I guess, 3 with Kareem. So he would have won 5 championships
He
without
sure did.
him. Yeah.
Which every time people want to say, oh, well, you got
Look who
lucky
he
on your
had.
first couple, and then you had – no.
Yeah.
Like he won with everybody.
Yeah.
You already mentioned this, that he 15 seasons before he won his first one. You happen to know between college and high school what his winning percentage was?
About 83, something like 830, something like that. It was over.
813, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's astounding.
It is astounding.
Okay, so the 2 times we talked about 10 championships over 12 years. So one of the years they did not win was 1966. Who won it that year?
I think that was 66. Was that the Texas Western
It
team?
was.
The time, first time an all-black team had won the NCAAs.
Absolutely correct. And the other time was in 1974?
Yeah, I think that was 1974. I wouldn't say. Was that not Villain? That wasn't Valvano's team, was it?
It was Valvano's University, but it wasn't his team.
Yeah.
So that was NC State.
And North Carolina State.
Yeah, with David Thompson.
David Thompson.
I think Norm Sloan might have been the coach.
Yep.
Yep. All right. So they had that 88-game winning streak.
That was the year that Walton didn't, right?
Right. And I wanted you to talk a little bit. Do you happen to remember that? They used to have a third-place game at the NCAA tournament when you lost in the semis. And I think Coach came back and didn't play the seniors because his rationale was their season's over, and he was getting started with the next crew. Do you remember that story at all?
I don't, honestly. Yeah. Interestingly, I don't.
That was interesting because eventually they got rid of that third-place game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he started that. So UCLA went on that 88-game winning streak. They started it with a win over UC Santa Barbara. Who ended it?
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame sure did.
Digger.
You already you already told me this one. What were his team's records at Pauley Pavilion?
Yeah, I think it was 179 and 2, or
149 and 2.
Yeah.
That's something else. What did Wooden win on July 23rd, 2003?
Was that the Presidential Medal of Freedom?
Medal of Freedom, nation's highest civilian honor. He sure did. He wrote several books, including a book for children, which I enjoyed reading to my children.
Yeah, Inch and Miles, The
Yeah.
Journey to Success. That's a really important book, because that book is used in a number of grade schools across the country as kind of a template for character behavior. I'd like to see it taught in every school, grade school in America. If we could teach our kids the pyramid of success growing up, and they learn those behaviors all the way through college, man, I tell you, it'd be a very, very, very different world. We actually have built some tools around Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success assessments that you can take, that actually maps your own personal behavior on the Pyramid of Success. It's called the Individual Success Assessment. It's on our website, woodencourse.com. So, trying to see where your own behavior is using the pyramid as a template is a great idea. I'd like to see it. Actually, I've got an appointment today to talk to the dean of the business school at UCLA about that very subject.
Oh, that's great.
How we might use that within the environment at UCLA to help kids set a standard for their own behavior based on the pyramid, and work on improving it over the period of their college experiences.
Well, whatever a small part we can do with the podcast to spread the word, that part of it makes me proud. And it was really nice talking to you today. It was great. I enjoyed it very much. Thanks, Lynn.
Very much.
We hope you enjoyed the third installment of the Wooden Trilogy, and stay tuned to the end of this podcast for a song from Nell and John Wooden's favorite, the Mills Brothers. We encourage everyone to visit our website at sportsstoriespodcast.com, and please consider rating us and giving us a review on Apple or wherever you watch and listen. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is supported by the AAU. Find a local event and join at aausports.org. And remember, you can catch your favorite amateur sports live stream, replays, and highlights at ballertv.com. Sports Stories, along with East Bay, supports the Heroes Movement, a nonprofit that bridges the gap from mental or physical therapy to getting strong again through strength and conditioning workouts. This free service is available for any veteran of the United States Armed Forces. Visit heroesmovementusa.org for more information. Sports Stories with Denny Lennon is a production of Sports Stories, Inc. and is available on Apple Podcasts and YouTube, or wherever you listen and watch. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and give us a review. It really helps spread the word. You can find all our social media links, archives, and other info on our website at sportsstoriespodcast.com. Original music for Sports Stories is courtesy of Lennon Music Productions. Special thanks to the John R. Wooden Course and Wooden's Wisdom. Sports Story staff includes Marley Rice, Teresa Dolan, Bob McCall, Michael Lennon, Sienna Lennon, Brad Lawson, Christine Jimbo, and Jake Downey. Kick it out, Book!